Today, we're looking at a document that feels less like an article and more like a declaration.
hmm A manifesto almost.
Exactly. We're analyzing this firm script, a high-authority version written by a strategist named Faroohz. And what she did was take 13 years of marketing experience and apply it to a full-scale self-rebrand.
Which is fascinating.
So our mission here is to really pull out the core principles of self-definition, of assertive confidence that you can then use to, launch the highest authority version of yourself.
And it's such a focused piece of material. It immediately frames personal identity as like a global client brief.
Right.
She's not asking for validation. She's positioning herself as an expert who has just stopped asking for permission. And that gives the whole thing this really magnetic confidence.
And that confidence is built on what she calls this blunt truth she learned in marketing. So let's unpack that core idea.
Okay.
That not every piece of content is meant for every single audience.
Which is just, that's marketing 101, but applied to your own life. In business, it's market segmentation. If you try to appeal to everyone, your message gets so watered down it means nothing to anyone.
You become irrelevant.
A guaranteed path to irrelevance, yeah.
And she translates that directly into this life mandate.
It sounds a little harsh at first,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly liberating. Stop trying to resonate with people who aren't in your niche.
Yeah. For you listening, that means stop spending emotional energy on people who just fundamentally don't get your value.
But let's pause there for a second, the practical side of that. Because choosing to ignore or disappoint people, that's an active choice.
It is. It's an active boundary setting. It says,
Yeah.
look, if someone doesn't connect with what you offer, it's not a failure of the product of you. It's a failure of targeting.
Yeah.
You're just not their intended market.
I think a lot of people would struggle with that, though. This feeling that if you start trying to please everyone, you risk alienating, your boss, your clients, even family members.
How does her approach deal with that risk of isolation?
Well, her argument is that the risk of keeping the wrong audience is actually much, much higher.
Okay.
Think about it. High authority brands don't succeed by being universally loved. They succeed by being fiercely essential to a very specific group. She's saying your time, your emotional energy, they're finite.
Right.
So spending them trying to convert someone who will never get the real you is just, it's a strategic waste.
So by adopting this high authority persona, she's basically defining the audience she wants to attract, not the one she feels obligated to please.
Exactly.
Okay, let's get into this first major area where she redefines herself by reframing a difference as an asset. And this is where it gets really interesting for anyone who feels like their own wiring is, a liability. She shares that she's lived with ADHD since she was 11.
Right, and traditionally that's often framed as a challenge, something you have to compensate for. But what she does is it's a masterclass in professional reframing. She doesn't just acknowledge it, she leverages it as a critical asset. She calls herself a professional drafter.
I love that term, a professional drafter. It implies this constant necessary process of iteration.
Yeah, and she defines it as someone who has to explore every angle and anticipate every failure.
So it's thoroughness by necessity.
Precisely. And think about the strategic value of that. In consulting, anticipating failure is the highest form of risk mitigation. So if her brain wiring means she has to meticulously explore every angle, that perceived struggle is suddenly a competitive advantage for her clients.
She doesn't have to force herself to be thorough.
No, thoroughness is just how she functions. It's part of her core expertise.
But okay, let's be real for a moment. Reframing something like neurodiversity into an asset, it takes a huge amount of emotional work. It's not just a quick decision. Does she talk about that friction?
She talks about the consequence of not doing it. She says that even though she knew her value as a drafter, she let her own personal identity sit in the drafts for 2 years.
2 years.
2 years. And it wasn't a lack of professional confidence. It was because she was fighting against these brand guidelines written by a society that just didn't get her personal brief.
That is such a powerful way to put it. The 2-year holdup wasn't just procrastination.
Yeah.
It was her trying to force herself into a mold that didn't fit. We all do that.
Yeah.
We accept these unspoken societal rules for who we're supposed to be.
Absolutely. And think about what those guidelines are. Be consistent. Don't be too vulnerable. Communicate in a way that doesn't disrupt things. We spend years just micro-editing ourselves to fit a rule book that was never written for us.
It sounds exhausting. That 2-year holdup really shows the hidden cost of it all. You're just draining energy trying to sustain a false product.
And that energy drain leads us right into the heart of her argument, the high cost of external optimization.
Okay.
She describes this turning point where her professional work became so good that no one could argue with it. And what happened? The critics stopped attacking the work
Right.
and started attacking the worker, her brand.
Ah, that's a classic move. If you can't fault the results, you attack the person delivering them.
Precisely. And she gives these very specific examples that I think are going to be painful aha moments for a lot of people listening.
Let's go through them. They're so relatable. The first was that her confidence, her belief in her own work, was called attitude.
Right. Which is, so often a word used to diminish a woman's authority. If you speak with confidence, people who lack it often label it as an emotional flaw, like attitude, just to bring you down to their level.
The second one, her knowledge, the very thing clients were paying top dollar for, was rebranded as aggression.
Yeah, knowledge, when it's delivered directly, can be seen as disruptive. She was likely being efficient and definitive, which is what you hire a strategist for. But for peers who are threatened by that clarity, it's just easier to call it aggression.
And the third critique, and this one feels the most painful, her free spirit was dismissed as a flaw.
This whole list is the core evidence for her thesis. It's proof that optimizing for others is just fundamentally destructive. These aren't critiques of her work.
No, they're criticisms of her very being.
Yes. This is the price you pay when you let other people write your personal brief. You become a version of yourself, optimized for someone else's comfort.
Wow, that phrase, optimized for someone else's comfort, that really hits home. It's the essence of making yourself smaller, constantly editing yourself, shrinking your personality, just to make sure the people around you don't feel challenged.
And the moment you optimize for comfort, you lose two things that are critical for a high authority brand: impact and authenticity. She's arguing that if your authentic self makes the wrong audience uncomfortable, the flaw isn't in you, it's in your audience selection.
You're pitching to the wrong market.
Exactly.
So if your personal market is consistently misunderstanding your value, her professional logic says you have to scrap the campaign. And that's what she did. She started a full-scale rebrand.
And this is where the marketing metaphor becomes, a radical practical application. She realized this wasn't something she could fix with small tweaks. It needed a total strategic overhaul, using the same tools she uses for global clients.
She didn't buy a self-help book. She wrote a new brief for herself.
She wrote a new brief.
Let's break down those strategic principles she used. This is really the tactical map for anyone listening who wants to do this themselves. She lists 3 key steps, starting with defining her personal tone of voice.
Which is so crucial. In marketing, tone dictates everything. How a message is received, where the boundaries are. Applied personally, it means consciously choosing how you want to be heard.
It's about your non-negotiables.
Yes. Is your tone definitive, humorous, factual? You're setting the emotional baseline for every interaction from that point on.
And that's not just for speaking, right? It's for emails, for how you handle conflict, for everything. It's the filter.
It's the filter for all communication. And the second step was setting her mission. And this isn't just a professional goal like increase revenue by 10%.
How is a personal mission different from a goal? I think a lot of people confuse the two.
A goal is something you achieve externally. A promotion, a degree. A mission is the why behind those goals. It's your ultimate benchmark. For her, that mission probably became something like to operate with a radical authenticity.
Right.
And once you define that, every critique, every opportunity gets measured against it. Does this help me fulfill my mission? If not, then it's just noise.
Which is her third step, filtering out the noise. In marketing, noise is irrelevant data, chatter. But personally, in a world where we're so connected, what does that actually look like?
It looks like that aggressive audience segmentation we talked about. It means actively reducing input from people who are not your target audience.
Yeah.
If someone's feedback is constantly pushing you back into that draft version of yourself,
Telling you to soften your knowledge or tone down your confidence.
that's irrelevant data. You have to build a firewall against those voices and only focus on input that serves your mission.
It's such a coherent strategy. She's treating her identity like a brand that needs protection from, really, external sabotage. It shows that real change isn't about emotional hand-wringing. It's about strategic rigor.
And that brings us to the most practical takeaway in the whole piece. She says, and this is a direct quote, if the professional brand is failing the personal life, it's time to scrap the campaign and start over.
That is the directive so many people need to hear. If your external success is costing you your internal fulfillment, it's a failed campaign.
You can't be one person at work and suppress your real self at home. The external has to serve the internal.
You have to launch the version of you that can actually live the life you want to live.
And it completely reframes success. High authority isn't about power or awards. It's about owning yourself coherently. That internal coherence, that's the real ROI.
And that's exactly the conclusion she comes to. The focus shifts entirely away from client launches and external wins to this internal project. She says the most rewarding project isn't some big win, but standing firmly in my identity.
It's that moment where she stopped being the perpetually edited draft and just launched the final product. She's declaring success on her own terms.
And her final identity assertion is just the perfect embodiment of that. It's unapologetic, it's organic.
It is. It's the final line of her new brief. I'm Farah. I'm organic, I'm unfiltered, and I'm finally out of the drafts. That shift from a pending document to a launched product, that's the win.
Which provides the perfect challenge for you, the listener. If you are sitting on a draft version of yourself, waiting 2 years, 20 years for society's approval, that waiting is the cost. It's time to apply some of that strategic rigor to your own identity.
I mean, the core question this whole thing raises is about agency. It's about execution. Are you still waiting for approval, or are you ready to launch that high authority, unfiltered version of you? Because that personal brief society wrote for you, it might be time to scrap the campaign.